Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and in this video we'll be discussing the future of ESO coming in the year 2021. I want to give you my current theory regarding the next major chapter release. I want to talk about some new and updated systems, as well as discuss the possibility of a new class being released in the next year. Lots of exciting things to talk about, so let's jump right into it. So as many of you know, every year the developers over at ZeniMax Online Studios come up with some type of overarching theme, as well as unlock a new major area of the map for a big DLC release that they like to call a chapter. First, I think this is a great system, and they've had a lot of success the past few years, so I want to congratulate the team on doing a great job at keeping the game fresh and interesting and continuing to bring in more and more players. For example, this year we had the Dark Heart of Skyrim, of course focused on vampires and unlocking the map of Western Skyrim. The year before that, we had the focus on dragons, and then they opened up the location of Elsewhere. We've also had Somerset and Morrowind previously, so lots of great content has been added over time, and the total amount of areas we have to explore now is just amazing. So much more than when the game launched just 6 years ago. Now, when it comes to predicting the next chapter zone, it's very possible to simply look at the world map and basically narrow down the potential locations to determine what zones could be coming next. Generally speaking, we do have some major large areas still left to discover in ESO. This includes Blackmarsh, Hammerfell, Cyrodiil, and even quite a bit remaining in Skyrim. Now, we'll talk more about maps in a minute, but for now I want to focus on a possible upcoming Elder Scrolls milestone, which I think could have a big impact on ESO coming up in 2021. The development of the Elder Scrolls Online goes back all the way to 2007 when ZeniMax Online Studios was first formed. I think this is interesting because many players assume when they first hear about an online Elder Scrolls game that, oh, it's like Skyrim Online then, or it's Skyrim with friends, simply because Skyrim was the most popular Elder Scrolls game at the time. But if you look at the actual development timelines for both ESO and Skyrim, it's a little bit more complicated than that. For example, we know that when Skyrim was released back in 2011, the Elder Scrolls Online was roughly 4 years into its own development cycle already. We also know that Skyrim was created by a completely different studio, Bethesda Game Studios. So at least early on, the connection between ESO and Skyrim is probably pretty small. To see what inspired ESO, you have to look back even further at the Elder Scrolls titles that were released before Skyrim came out. That discussion brings us to 2006, 1 year before development of ESO started. Now, 2006 saw the release of another single-player's Elder Scrolls title, The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion. Oblivion was a massively popular game at the time, and I think because of that, it had to have inspired the developers of ESO, at least early on. For example, we know that some of the early artwork and graphics for The Elder Scrolls Online had a much brighter style, more comparable, I think, to Oblivion. Oblivion was also the last Elder Scrolls single-player game to make use of in-game classes, which also features, pretty heavily as the backbone of character development and customization in the Elder Scrolls Online. There's even some overlap in classes when you look at both games, specifically the Sorcerer and the Nightblade class, which are pre-made classes back in Oblivion as well. Now, Oblivion is still an extremely popular title, and the year 2021 actually marks the 15-year anniversary of Oblivion's original release back in 2006. So I expect to see the Oblivion hype train pretty much come out in full force next year. And if I know anything about ESO and the developers, they love a good hype train. They love to make use of nostalgia. So this really is the perfect time for a return to Oblivion and Cyrodiil for the game's next chapter. So I mentioned that the Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion takes place in Cyrodiil. So I'm sure what you're thinking, ESO already has Cyrodiil as a playable zone, and it's like a big zone, there's a lot there. And while that is true, there's actually huge chunks missing from the original province of Cyrodiil from Oblivion going into ESO. Just for comparison, let's take a full map of Cyrodiil overlaid onto the current Cyrodiil map in ESO. You can see we have plenty of undeveloped content areas both on the east and west sides of the province, either of which could make fantastic chapter zones. These areas also include major locations from the Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion, including Skingrad, Bravil, Blackwood, and Leyawiin. So I think the size and space is there for a chapter release. The Oblivion anniversary is coming, but that's really not enough to make a video about, so where is the real evidence? Well, the evidence is here already, and I think it all points to Cyrodiil as well. First, let's talk about data mining, which is usually a clear indication of what's to come in the next year. For example, last year we had vampire-themed crown crates data mined pretty early on, and those pointed to this year's vampire theme. We also had the Gloomspore crates, which pointed to the Blackreach zone underneath Skyrim. Now, this year has been no different, with new crown crates and more being discovered in advance of next year's content. This is all done through data mining. I'll have links to all the websites below where these details came from in case you want to check them out. I definitely would recommend it if you're interested. Now, first up, we have the Potentates crates, which have a very imperial-looking theme to them with that red crest. And now, I'm not a huge, Second Era Elder Scrolls lore person, but I believe that the Potentates does have something to do with the remaining Cyrodiil Empire. Let me know in the comments if you know more about that. Then we also have new antiquities for next year, again with the Cyrodiil theme, including this white gold tower miniature and an Amulet of Kings replica. Next up, I did want to point out this latest slip on the PTS cycle for Markarth. This happened just recently, which revealed a codename for the next chapter, which they are calling Badlands. This was visible the first couple days of the Markarth PTS, and as you can see, this actually appeared right in the chapter menu on the PTS, which is exactly where you would expect to see a new chapter appear for purchases next year. Now, Badlands can mean a variety of things, but it's interesting, in the French language version of the game, it was revealed that this actually translated into Deadlands. And Deadlands is the Oblivion realm of Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric prince from the Elder Scrolls 4. And speaking of Dagon, we have probably the most interesting data mine clue for next year, with a full model of the Daedric prince being found recently on the Markarth PTS as well. In the description below, I'll have more links to the full model render if you want to check this out. But this basically confirms it for me that there will be some connection with Oblivion, the province of Cyrodiil, and Dagon as part of next year's chapter. The Daedric Prince has never appeared in ESO fully in person as of yet, though he is mentioned by name as part of the City of Ash dungeon questline, and he's hinted at making his eventual return to the in-game world of ESO. Now, this would place him several hundred years before the events of Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, where he was a major threat, but this could make a very interesting sort of prequel to the events of that game for sure. Now, there is one more thing that I wanted to mention, and that's the conclusion of the Dark Heart of Skyrim storyline and how this hints at the next chapter as well. Although really, it's not even a hint at this point, you guys. It's more like a big glowing neon sign saying where the next chapter is going to be. So over the past few years, main characters in these year-long stories, they've always been the best direct source of information when it comes to where the next series of events is heading. A few years ago, for example, we had Razumdar, he was talking about Somerset Isles. Last year we had Saisahan, we had Caldwell hinting at a return of Lyris and the location of Solitude in Skyrim, obviously leading towards Western Skyrim and the Dark Heart of Skyrim chapter. And this year seems to be following the same pattern. So towards the end of the Markarth DLC, you'll see Lyris mention Skingrad by name, which is part of the Western Cyrodiil province that we looked at earlier. Skingrad it's a really beautiful and unique city in the Elder Scrolls 4, and I think it would make a fantastic chapter location for ESO as well. Also, one thing to note here is that the only remaining member of the Companions we haven't seen return yet from the main storyline of ESO, Varen Aquilarius, the former Cyrodiil Emperor. I think there's definitely a connection here. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Varen back in some form at least. All right, so we narrowed down the chapter location for 2021 to Cyrodiil, most likely the western side of the province, which includes Skingrad and Kolovia. But what else can we see in terms of content maybe next year and new systems? So in previous years, we've had additions to the game like the Antiquity system, we had jewelry crafting, transmuting, we've had new guild skill lines, and even new classes. So what's going to be added in 2021? Well, we really need to look no further than what the developers have already said themselves in terms of expanding the game. I think one thing we'll see for sure is even more focus on performance improvements, as well as potentially some new directions for Cyrodiil PvP. For example, recently the team has been testing out these various solutions to address lag in Cyrodiil. I think we'll probably see a full implementation of one of those experiments at either the Q1 or Q2 release next year. More antiquities and more mythic items, I think that's guaranteed for next year as well. We've seen this already with the Markarth DLC, and we also know that it's one of the developers' favorite new systems. We've also heard that they're very happy with the housing system in ESO and how that's added to the game, including the new character pathing system. Character pathing is apparently just step one into further investments into ESO housing. So I'd expect to see much more with housing next year, including more NPCs, more pathing options. Also, and this is the biggest one as far as I'm concerned, according to recent statements by Rich, the champion point system is currently being reworked and the new version will most likely be available to players in the next 1 or 2 updates, so very soon. I could definitely see that coinciding with the chapter release in Q2, just like they did the vampire and werewolf updates for the chapter this year. Now, we don't know for sure what's being done with champion points. I'm hoping for a more unique system overall, more unique modifiers, more unique passives, instead of just the usual like percent-based modifiers for damage and damage reduction. I'd love to see more unique playstyles added to the game through the CP system, so I hope that's what they're working on. This brings us to the giant elephant in the room, I think, which is, will we see a new class added to ESO in 2021? I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say no. We probably will not. Now, that's not to say that I don't want a new class, because I do. I mean, for me, as someone who creates content and builds for ESO, new classes are pretty much the most exciting thing that the game does at this point. But regardless, I think if you look at the trajectory of where the game is headed now, especially looking at all the previous changes we've experienced over the last year or so, I don't think we'll be seeing that new class. Number one, the developers have focused heavily on skill audits and skill balance overall. They've been working hard on putting systems into place to attempt to balance classes against each other, which is a really difficult thing to do. And usually when we see new classes added to ESO, it creates these huge shifts in balance. So if you think about it, have they been doing all this balance work while also trying to add a new and powerful class that's going to just tip that balance over on its head again? Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, at least not yet. And number two, the development team, they've promised that they're going to continue to improve on the existing classes in ESO by taking a look at more unique abilities and improving the player fantasy elements of each class. Now, we've seen them work on that this year a little bit with new class spammables, like, for example, Stone Giant for the Stamina Dragonite. They brought in Crystal Weapon for the Stamina Sorcerer. But there's still so much more that they can do to improve on the classes that already exist in the game. If we're being honest, not much separates each class right now in terms of what they're capable of, and we're in danger of classes becoming really just homogenized and kind of boring. So my hope is that they continue to improve on this area and work to make each class more unique and distinct from each other, whether that means updating skills, updating passives, maybe even adding new skill morphs or a new skill line for each class. I think this would be a much more valuable approach than adding a 7th class for next year. At this point, I don't know of any evidence that they are working on adding a new class for 2021. I mean, yes, if you go way back in time, there's some information on the Battle Mage class, which was found in the game's original files as a potential class. That never came about. There's also been roughly 2 years gap between classes when they're added to the game, right? So between 2021 and when the Necromancer class was released in 2019, that's 2 years. And then there was another 2-year gap between that and the Warden class. But again, that doesn't confirm a new class at all when you think about it. I mean, ZeniMax has never said their goal was to release a new class every 2 years. That's just how it worked out. Hopefully their goal is to release a new class whenever it makes the most sense for the game and not just at arbitrary intervals. Don't get me wrong though, I think we will see a new class in the future, but maybe in 2022 or 2023 when the game has matured just a little bit more. Of course, I could be completely wrong in all of this, and that's where I'd love to hear what you have to say when it comes to the Elder Scrolls Online in 2021. What zones do you think will be coming next? What systems will come with them? And do you think there's a chance for a new class or not? As always, if you like the video, don't forget to like it. If you're new here, make sure you're subscribed for much more ESO content with notifications turned on so you don't miss anything. If you'd like to support the channel further, there's links to my social media down below, as well as the new website. Make sure you check those out. As always, thank you all so much for watching today. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.